Сегодня у нас юбилейная конференция. Мы проводим тестинг стейдж в 3-й раз. И мне очень приятно, что в зале я вижу массу людей, которые все время с нами и каждый раз балуют нас своим присутствием. Поднимите, пожалуйста, руки, кто уже 3-й раз на конференции. О, нормально, слушайте, класс. Друзья, в этом году у нас была обещана версия конференции 3.1. И мы максимально постарались сделать все возможное, чтобы было не только 3, но и вот эта вот единичка, которую мы вам обещали. Мы достаточно плотно готовились и очень старались. Мне кажется, по крайней мере, я очень просил программный комитет быть в зале. У нас есть Антон. И у нас есть Иван Пашко. А Иван Пашко, как обычно, я думаю, опаздывает. Иван. Хорошо. Еще у нас есть замечательная девушка Галина Доксвиль, но она, к сожалению, сегодня присутствовать на конференции по семейным обстоятельствам не смогла. Но вклад ее от этого совершенно не уменьшился. Девушка очень классная, замечательный эксперт. И давайте ее поддержим аплодисментами. Вы потом мне расскажете, что мы Галину объявляли, но ее не было. Сейчас я немножко расскажу о конференции. После этого программный комитет тоже расскажет пару слов, а потом вас ждет шоу-программа. 2 дня крутых докладов, 1 день веселой дискотеки, круглые столы, интервью с экспертами. Будет абсолютно все. Я вам обещаю, будет очень классно, и вы не пожалеете. Итак, как обычно, у нас 5 потоков. 2 технических потока. Technical A, Technical B. На 5-м этаже и 3 потока на 4-м этаже. Это Management, Security и Out of the Box. В этом году у нас в программе интервью. У нас есть 3 эксперта, которым вы можете задать вопросы. Вопросы о жизни, вопросы о профессии, вопросы о всем, чем захотите. И самое интересное, что они обязаны будут вам ответить. Один из экспертов — это Дэн, создатель APPIUM. Дальше у нас Грэхэм Басс. Грэхэм Басс — это руководитель рабочих групп по разработке STQB Advanced Level и Expert Level. Все вопросы касательно STQB живо, умерла, чувствует себя хорошо, задаем Грэхэму и получаем ответ. Также у нас Марина Кротофил. Марина Кротофил — неоднократный участник крутейшей конференции по security. Это Black Hat. Все вопросы к Марине Кротофил. Расскажет, как работается в Соединенных Штатах, как работается в Европе, как вообще работается, как стать классным security-тестировщиком. Все узнаете. И традиционно, друзья, наш ведущий, бессменный ведущий конференции Testing Stage — это...
Добрый день. Непонятно, кто это. Это, наверное, Александр. Да. Здравствуйте. Очень рад видеть всех вас. Очень рад 3-й раз вести конференцию. Это становится очень хорошей традицией. Каждый раз буду вас развлекать как могу в перерывах между настоящим, так скажем, контентом, за которым вы и пришли. Вот. Надеюсь, все получится и будете счастливы. Да?
Спасибо. Несколько важных организационных моментов. Те, кто приехал на машине, должны поставить печать в талоне парковки. Это важно, потому что в таком случае парковка бесплатна. Но если вы хотите платить, можете, собственно говоря, печать не ставить. Up to you. Второй важный организационный момент — это то, что сегодня вечером будет вечеринка. Вечеринка будет классная, оставайтесь. Параллельно с вечеринкой будет проходить игра для тестировщиков. И будут проходить 2 круглых стола по менеджменту и по архитектуре автоматизации тестирования. Они будут проходить параллельно, поэтому вы можете курсировать с одного круглого стола на другой, потом зарядиться хорошим настроением в фуд-зоне, почувствовать себя хорошо. Мы очень постарались, чтобы в этом году пати было, по крайней мере, не хуже, чем было в прошлом. Что еще? Наверное, я с удовольствием расскажу о наших партнерах. Скажу, что в этом году традиционный наш партнер — это International Software Quality Institute. Это компания, которая с нами на каждой конференции. ESQI занимается сертификацией, проведением различных сертификаций. ESTend, подходите, знакомьтесь. Все участники конференции традиционно получают скидку на сертификацию. Также в этом году традиционно с нами компания Luxoft, DAX, компания Zone 3000 и наш новый партнер, компания Ring Ukraine. Также мне бы хотелось упомянуть компанию True Automation. Ребята делают классный продукт, интересный. В нем есть магическое слово AI. У них сегодня будет доклад. Ну и в принципе вы можете на стенде их помучить, поговорить с ними и выяснить все детали, если они, конечно, захотят поделиться ноу-хау того, как работает их замечательная программа автоматизации тестирования. Есть такой buzzword. Так, Иван Пашко. Иван, прошу. Антон, прошу. Ребята, попрошу вас сказать пару слов о том, как вы старались, как вы, в общем, работали и так далее.
Привіт. Раз. Всі розуміють українську чи мені свідчити з російської мови? О, нормально, добре. Все-таки Київ, Україна, Testing Stage. Так вийшло, що 2 роки до цього я був учасником конференції Testing Stage. В цьому році мені випала нагода бути і в програмному комітеті. У Антона обидві нагоди випало. Що ж, ми для вас підготували, як на мене, досить цікаві доповіді. Вони і практичні, і ті, які вас надихають, і, в принципі, корисні як для тестувальників, як для security-інженерів, і просто як для саморозвитку. Тобто у нас дуже багато потоків, унікальні, як на мене, спікери, які приїхали з України і за кордону України. Тому насолоджуйтесь. І якщо у вас будуть якісь запитання або зауваження, або вам хтось сподобався так, що ви хочете бачити в наступному році, або навпаки не хочете, запам'ятайте оці 2 обличчя і просто нам розказуйте. І всі зауваження, ми з задоволенням вислухаємо вашу критику. Насолоджуйтесь сьогоднішнім днем. Дякую вам, що прийшли.
Дякую, Іване. Я багато не буду казати. Хочу сказати тільки те, що ми намагалися створити найкращу конференцію в Україні, запросити сюди найкращих спікерів, найцікавіші доповіді, які і цікаві технічно, і також веселі та не нудні. Тому якщо ви десь бачите нудоту, кажіть. Дуже вам дякую, що прийшли. Починаємо!
Итак, друзья, я в таком случае объявляю конференцию открытой, и через 10 минут вас ждет первый в этом году на этой конференции keynote. 10 минут кофе, но не больше. Окей? Увидимся через 10 минут.
Что, будем потихонечку начинать. Ребят, пару организационных моментов, пока вы тут пару минут еще собираетесь. Значит, это зал для technical потока, technical A. Здесь будут проводиться технические, да, так скажем, мероприятия эти 2 дня. В конце каждого выступления после спикеров вы можете задавать вопросы, то есть регламент будет варьироваться, но в любом случае будет Q&A. Главное, помните, что, чтобы задать вопрос, нужно поднять ручку, к вам подойдет волонтер и расскажет, даст микрофон, по крайней мере, потому что мы стараемся транслировать на тот зал, записывать и так далее. Так что будьте терпеливы. Ну и хотелось бы напомнить вкратце про приложение. Есть специальное приложение, которое вы можете скачать, зайти, обсудить вопросы конкретно к данному выступлению, задать вопросы и так далее. То есть оно традиционно выложено на всех площадках и можете скачать. Так, switching to English, because we have foreign guests here. So, meet Dan. Dan Cuellar is the creator of open source mobile framework called APPIUM. I bet you heard of it for sure. He was previously headed the test organization in Shazam in London and Zusk in San Francisco. So worked as software engineer in Microsoft Outlook for Mac and other Pure products. Please welcome Dan Cuellar.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone here. And then apparently there's another room full of people, which is somewhere else in this building. So good morning to you guys as well. You guys are the safe ones. You're quarantined from this horrible disease I have right now. So I apologize if I cough into the mic a few times. Anyways, as you mentioned, I'm Dan. I did all of those things he said I did, and I created a project called APPIUM. And I'm here today to tell you a story about how that happened. And hopefully you guys can learn something from it. I do appreciate that this is a testing conference. I find that when I do development conferences, everyone wants me to talk about code and show them code. And so don't worry, there's like 2 pieces of code in this presentation for those of you who want that. But for the rest of you, this is a testing conference. I appreciate that it's more welcoming for just to talk about things without coding. So I guess we'll start with the beginning. So it all started not that long ago, about 8 years ago. I was working at a dating site in San Francisco called Zeusk, and it all started with the most terrifying 5 words in software testing. This slide is less true than it used to be, but does anyone, I always ask people to guess, and maybe someone here knows what these are, but it's just generally funny to hear what people think they are. Would anyone just yell it out? What are the most terrifying 5 words in software testing? It's a shy crowd. Could someone translate that? I don't know what that meant. It sounded terrifying. So it used to be this. And for those of you who haven't been doing this long enough, when the App Store first came out, if you made a mistake and you released it to the App Store, you were going to have to wait several weeks till you could fix that mistake. So that meant that your company might be losing money or losing customers for several weeks. So it was a lot like another thing I had encountered in my career a bit earlier, and I'm sure no one here will know what this is. But a long, long time ago, when I first started working on Microsoft Office, we would put things on actual optical discs. And yeah, if you made a mistake on that, that was really expensive because you had to go destroy them. Well, one, you had to go find them because you'd already shipped them to the customer. 2, you had to destroy them. And 3, you had to make new ones. Then you had to send them and deliver them. It was a total mess. And so the App Store kind of brought this back. It was kind of after, I guess, the whole .com boom started, and there was this whole, move fast and break things mantra that was going through the valley at the time. And then the App Store sort of put us back where we were when we were doing CDs. And so for me, I needed something better than what I think most people were doing at the time for web. If you look at companies like Facebook and others that were around and very popular at that time, they were totally okay with things not working because they were a website. If they ever found a bug, they could fix it. The customers could get it fairly instantly. There wasn't a lot of cost to them to having bugs. But when you're an app in the App Store, as I explained, that wasn't the case. So I looked around, and the tooling out there to do good testing on mobile was not awesome. I won't name the names, or if I could tell you what they were, but no one here would have probably used any of it. But anyway, so I wrote a thing called APPIUM, which is really just a small hack. Here is the, I think this is the original version of APPIUM right there. You probably can't read it, but I'll give you some of the highlights. It's basically a giant while true loop that looks for files in a folder with different commands in them, actually raw JavaScript commands, and then it actually reads them in. It runs exec on them, or I guess what's it called, eval in JavaScript, and then it uses Python to write out a text file to a folder. So the magic of this was that when the first version of automation came out for iOS, it was part of the profiling app in Xcode. So there's a profiling app called Instruments. And it had a little functionality in there where you could sort of like record a test and play it back. But I don't know if I'm amongst the right people for this, but I'll say this with full confidence, that recorded tests are terrible. And I think we can all agree on that. And if we don't, I don't know, I'll fight you all later. But anyway, I wanted to write some non-recorded tests. I wanted to write something more sophisticated. And so with this little hack here and a magic method that Apple put in the library called host.perform task with path arguments timeout, which basically meant execute a shell command on the machine running the tests. So with shell commands, you can do anything, and we did. I built a little server that lets you sort of interact with it like you did with Selenium. And then there were some other interesting parts to the code later, but earlier, but later. We had this gem here. which is not a security risk at all. But if you ever used one of the earlier versions of Appium 8 years ago, this piece of code is running in the background on your machine. What it does is it just waits, if it sees any user or password prompt, it just enters your user and password and hits enter. So nothing wrong could happen there. But I guess the story, where I really want to start the story, is when Appium actually started getting wider use. And so it was kind of a long time ago, about 7 years ago, almost to the day. I went to a conference in London called the Selenium Conference. And you may recognize the man to my right. That's Jason Huggins. And you're going to see how close this came to not happening. I like to just sort of show this video so people can sort of see, like, the line between failure and success is very, very thin. And so what's happening here is I'm giving a lightning talk at the conference. And of course, much like this morning, I was having technical difficulties with the projection. And I'm getting a countdown, and if this countdown hits 0, I'm getting kicked off the stage and not getting to talk. And you see, like, with 2 seconds left, it comes in. So barely made it, but anyway. But much like today, I think we had about 90 seconds before this talk started that it all started working. So anyways, at that conference, I gave a lightning talk, and I showed off what I had done to other people. And, I thought it was, really cool. But, and there was a big round of applause from the room, so I thought everyone else thought it was really cool. But then nothing happened for like 6 months. So, all these people said, oh, this is so great, we should talk, here's my card, here's my email. And then no one actually came and talked to me or emailed me. But like maybe 6 months later, Jason, who was the one who almost killed the project by counting me down, called me. I don't know how he got my phone number. And he said, come to this bar in San Francisco and bring your laptop. I want to show that thing you did at that conference 6 months ago to some of my guys. So I went to that bar with a laptop, which in San Francisco is not a weird thing to do, to bring a laptop to a bar. And everyone to sit around it and look at code. But I showed it to his people, and then later I got this invite to this other conference called the Mobile Testing Summit, where Jason and his company Sauce Labs had invited people from all around the world who tried to automate iOS and Android to put them in one room to sort of come up with an answer to something. And unbeknownst to me, I just showed them the code, and then I thought that was it. It was kind of like, I thought it was like a thing. You go to the bar, you just show, you laugh about it, you walk away. But they actually went and took it back and did a lot of things to it. And at the conference, they debuted it running on the Sauce Labs cloud. And then, ever since then, we started the open source project, and it's kind of been a long run of history. But I guess what was really important when we started was sort of just getting the word out. So whether it involves getting a random phone call from a stranger and asking you to bring a laptop to a bar, or other things, like the hardest part of doing anything is really just sort of getting it moving and getting the word out. So for the first year, Jonathan and I would answer every single question people would post on our forum. You may notice that today this doesn't happen. We'll get into why that is later, but if you were lucky enough to use Appium in the first year, you would get a personal response from me or Jonathan within a day on the forum. We answered most of the questions on Stack Overflow. We had like a running thing for looking for Appium questions. We spoke at any conference that would have us. They weren't all quite as nice as this. Normally I was not in front of a crowd of 600 people at a 4-star hotel. Some of them were quite strange. But back then it didn't matter if it was like, someone's closet in their apartment in Berlin or whatever, we would go. Which kind of sounds like a bad idea now that I think about it, but at the time it seemed like a good idea. I guess another thing that we did is we put together a philosophy and a mission, which I'll show you later. I haven't changed that slide in 7 years. I don't think I'll ever change that slide, which I think is sort of one of the reasons why Appium has been successful, is that we sort of got the philosophy right from the get-go. I also went and talked to some companies that were interested. And lastly, I used Twitter and social media to my advantage as well. But anyway, as I mentioned, we would go anywhere that would have us. So I put some photos up of places that we went, or that I went, I guess. So you can see some of the places are nice. That one in Belfast there is kind of just a pub. Someone invited me to a pub in Belfast. Once again, I guess in England too, or in Ireland too, it's normal to bring a laptop to a bar as well. There's actually surprisingly lots of bars in this. We went to some strange places. I think I gotta look at what these photos are. There was a conference in Poland, which I guess is right next door. it had a costume code. We had to dress up like we were in the Polish military. So obviously I didn't have a Polish military uniform, but you'll see later, like they didn't let that prevent them from inviting me. There was another one where I think there was some kind of art sale going on in Poland as well. There's like a photo with some mermen. When I went to China, they had like a raffle going when I was talking, and they were like handing out stuffed animals. And there was like my projector, but like there were 2 projectors on the side, and they were like running down like some kind of lottery. And then every now and then someone would just shout out in the middle of my talk, I guess whatever the Chinese equivalent of bingo is, and then someone would throw them a stuffed animal. There's some other strange things you'll see there, and then I guess in the bottom left you'll sort of see, if you ever want an all-you-can-eat buffet to make money, just make the wallpaper that guy. That's your comrades there, geniuses. Anyway, there you can see they did give me a costume for that conference. So really nothing was beneath us. We would go anywhere. Like I mentioned, I would do anything, dress like anything. I think that other one in Russia, there was an agriculture conference sharing the space with us. So there were sheep around. Jonathan actually entertained people with a guitar. Generally, it wasn't glorious. But all it really took was some free food, and the food was good. And a flight somewhere exotic, wherever that might be, or just somewhere. I guess you guys know where this is. This is not my first time in your country. I live to tell about it too. Anyway, I should probably move on from that topic. But last time I came here, the weather wasn't so nice, and the scenery was a bit different. Anyway, well, actually, just a tram would do. I will warn you, I don't know if tram parties are a thing in Ukraine, but in Poland they definitely are. And the problem with the tram party is this. Like, I wanted to go, they invited me to the conference. I felt like it'd be nice. I'll, go drink on the tram for like 45 minutes, then I'll, hit the hay, get some work done. The tram didn't stop for 4 hours. And it was going, and like the lights in Poland changed for the tram, so it didn't even slow down. Like it was going like 50 kilometers an hour for a good way, and it was crammed full of drunk conference people and speakers and beer. And so generally, by the end of it, no one was in that good of a shape. We did eventually get it to pull over. I forgot what the Polish word for pull over is, but I learned it that night, and then I was able to get off it around 2 in the morning. Anyway, or, I don't know, I just found this funny. In Lithuania, if you're ever there, a pro tip, if you go to the bathroom, they don't have the nice like men's and women's symbols. They have like triangles pointing up or triangles pointing down. So I don't know if you've ever seen this before, but it confused the hell out of me. But in general, I use deductive reasoning to determine that the cleaner bathroom was the women's. So once I was in a bathroom and I saw that it was dirty, I knew I was in the right place, and it actually turns out. But if you ever want to know, the up arrow is women, the down arrow is men. Anyway, I also learned a lot by meeting all these people, so you may recognize the man in that photo. That's Simon Stewart, the man who runs the WebDriver project. Anyway, back to the presentation, sorry. This is a bit more of a scrapbook. So one interesting thing about open source is that losing control is actually a good thing. I think in most of your careers, like sort of the better you get at your jobs, the more responsibility they give you. I think in open source it's kind of the opposite. Like I really don't do very much for APPIUM these days, other than come to places like this and talk to people like you and try and sell it. There's a lot of like much better engineers working on it at the moment. But it's very different. So yeah, like one day someone just decided to open a website for us and made it for us, and now they run the website. Or some people at Sauce Labs decided to open a Twitter account and started tweeting at people from APPIUM. So at some point, someone decided it should work with Android, and they just committed that. And sort of organically it grows, right? Anyway, I guess some of the funnier stories were at one point there was a big argument, and the code base is actually initially written in Python, and the people on the project there were now more JavaScript people than Python people, so that's why it's a JavaScript project now. At some point, I lost the admin on the GitHub. So what happened was someone had joined the project, they'd contributed a lot, someone made them an admin, and they were being very helpful. They thought, oh, I should go clean up the admin list. Who is this guy? He never contributes anything. Let's get rid of him. And so then I found out like a couple of days later, and then I got it rectified. But there was like a week where I was not even on the project anymore, technically. And I guess sort of the coolest part, or I guess the part where you know you're doing well, is when your your conference proposal gets rejected. So I applied to this conference somewhere tropical, I think. It was winter. I needed to go somewhere, and it was a mobile testing conference. I was like, oh, this is the perfect topic. There's no way they're turning this down. And then, of course, they turned it down. And I mailed them, sort of in my arrogance. I was like, why are you turning this down? This is a total mistake on your part. Like, I definitely should give this talk there. And they said, oh, we turned it down because 2 other people submitted topics on the same thing. And I said, oh, okay. So it's actually good. When other people start talking about your thing and you don't need to talk about it anymore, that's actually a really good thing. Though I'm trying to get more people to sort of go out and spread the world. I tend to be the person that goes to the strange places. Everyone else goes to the beachy places or the places with good food or something like that. No offense to Chernobyl, as you saw earlier. It was totally worth whatever that cost. But it would be nice to have some more people on the project that were willing to sort of broaden their horizons a bit. And I guess we'll get into that later. So anyway, eventually I wasn't able to answer every question on the forum. Eventually it got too big, and I had to adapt for that. So it wasn't by hiring a bunch of contractors somewhere to do it. We learned that, sort of, if we took every decision we did and we were very transparent about it, we did everything on the forum, enough people read that eventually we're sort of training up people who could also help. So also commit notes, unit tests, all that stuff is really good for documentation and actual documentation as well. But it becomes really important as you get bigger. Another thing I thought would be fun to talk about is sort of conflict in an open source project. So I think most of you at your jobs, when there's a conflict, it usually goes to a manager, and the manager makes a decision, and then, whatever happens, happens. So no one works for me on APPIUM. They have almost no respect for me, believe it or not. So I am not in a position to do that. And it's kind of a good thing. So I think what I found helpful for resolving disputes is just debating the actual mission of your project and its purpose, as opposed to debating individual sort of decisions. So once you have your goal and your vision defined, all the decisions have to align with that. And that sort of becomes your boss, right? Our boss is our goal. It's not a person anymore. So the people who want to make changes that are in line with that vision tend to be successful, and the people that don't tend to leave and make other projects, which actually isn't a bad thing either. I manage people for a living, and if one of them leaves, I get in a modest amount of trouble, if it's someone who's good, right? And open source isn't like that. When someone leaves, they usually go work on another project, and it's still open source, and you can still benefit from their work. And I don't make any money on this. I get some free trips to some exotic places like Poland. So there are no children who depend on this for their food. I have a real job that actually pays my bills. So if someone goes and makes a better APPIUM, that's great for me. That's really nice for me. I won't have to go around and do so much of this for free food. Sometimes, you lose people, and it's okay, like I said, they work on other stuff. And competition is good for everybody. Like I said, no one needing. So if I learned anything from doing this, this is sort of the one slide that summarizes it. I worked at Microsoft when I started this project, or I guess I worked at Microsoft right before I started this project. And I sort of had very limited exposure to open source. It's not, Microsoft now is the biggest friend of open source, but when I worked there, it was the total opposite. It was sort of see no evil, hear no evil. They wouldn't even allow us to read about it. So when I started open source project, it was quite funny because it was kind of like someone who knew nothing about open source, running a project. So I used C# because that's a great programming language. But in hindsight, at the time it wasn't an open source programming language, so there weren't a lot of people writing free code in C#, which really hindered the project initially. I also used to think it was really nice, friendly, to reply to people's requests personally via email. And I thought that it was actually personal, and people would feel it was appreciated. And they did, but I ended up having to write the same email hundreds of times, when if I just answered it on a forum or posted what I did on GitHub, I would have had a lot less work to do. Used to, we would say that, oh, the code's the documentation. It doesn't need documentation. That's not true at all. I think one of the reasons APPIUM's been so successful is that we have good documentation and people are able to get going. And one, we're based on something like Selenium, which is well known and has good documentation. So in periods when we haven't had as good documentation, we can just say, oh, look at the WebDriver docs. But anyways, documentation is the #1 barrier to entry for most people. And then, yeah, I think I'll leave that there. So I kind of want to talk about how it evolved to and sort of where we're going. So that's sort of like the ghost of Christmas past part of this presentation. Now we're into sort of like the present. It started with me saying, I want to automate iOS just like I automate the web. Like, web works, I have Selenium, I know how to use that. Why am I learning something new to do iOS? That seems like a waste of my time. And it is. And so I built what I built that I showed you, that horrible slide worth of code that entered your password anytime anyone asked for it. But then we moved forward, and the APPIUM open source project was started, and we decided, well, I want to automate mobile applications using WebDriver. So it's another step. So it's not just iOS now, it's mobile. That's when we built the server, and we started actually conforming to the WebDriver protocol, and we were able to reuse a lot of the goodness from the Selenium project. The next step was the Mac and Windows drivers. So I wrote Mac and Windows. Well, there's several versions of the Windows driver. I wrote one that was terrible. Some guys from Siberia wrote a better one, and then Microsoft writes the current one. And then I also wrote the Mac driver as well. And so now we're automating not just mobile applications, but desktop as well. So from sort of shoehorning mobile into the WebDriver protocol, we sort of realized, well, actually, we didn't have to do that much to it. Like when we first started, we're like, oh, this isn't going to work. That's for automating websites. There's no page source. There's no cookies. There's no, like, it doesn't make sense. But we actually realized if you sort of bend your mind a bit, they're actually quite analogous. And so desktop required no modifications whatsoever to be supported. It was actually, I think, would have been easier to do desktop first, weirdly enough. So after that, I think it was Jason proposed this idea of star driver. So I guess, I don't know if this is still used, but probably. Like in the old days, I think this comes from like an asterisk, like wildcard character match. Like if you've ever had to like grep for something or something like that. But the idea is it's the driver for anything, right? So it's the star driver or asterisk driver. So we saw, well, desktop and mobile applications and websites all work with this protocol. It should, in theory, work for anything, fridges, watches, whatever it might be. And so it's proposed that we sort of start doing this kind of work. And this is ongoing. But I'm also here to sort of talk a bit today about how maybe we should skip this step and do something different. And we'll get to that. So currently, I think we're ending year 7 of the project. We have hundreds of contributors, hundreds of thousands, if not maybe 1 million or so users of APPIUM. We've had one conference, we're having another in 2 months in India, and we support a lot of different operating systems. But where are we going? And to talk about where we're going, we have to sort of go back a bit. Oh, good. Seeing people know this movie. Don't worry. There's no more cleverness than this. There's not like a bunch of references to it following. But does anyone know who this guy is? Because he's actually the guy that I think solved this problem like 500 years ago. I'll give you a hint, he's Italian. It's not Da Vinci. Does someone say Da Vinci? No. That's his name. But does anyone know what he did? There's a big hint in his photo as to what he did, what he's famous for. So this is the guy, way back in the day, that invented the way that we notate music nowadays. So, you know, the whole staff, clef, note, that whole thing. This is the guy. His name is Guido d'Arezzo, and I think he was some kind of Italian monk or something that did this. But anyway, one day, like, it occurred to me that, like, what we're doing here isn't all that different from what he had to do. So if you think about it, a composer doesn't know how the hell a tuba works. He doesn't know which button you press, where you blow, but he knows he wants to hear like a B flat or an F sharp or whatever he wants to hear. And that's what he writes in his notation. And I think automation should really be the same way, right? Like, I don't need to know how to control some particular low-level API on Android. Like, I just know that I want the power off, or I want, you know, the battery to be set to 20%, right? That's all I care about. But the musicians, like themselves, actually do know how to play their instrument, right? And so in our case, the automation frameworks do know how to talk to Android and do know how to make that stuff happen. And sort of there's this idea that we have capabilities that constrain like what people can and can't do, or I guess what instruments can and can't play, and that sort of thing. And we have the same thing in capabilities in WebDriver. So like if we were trying to build a WebDriver for composers, like I mentioned, it's going everywhere, right? Fridges, TVs, whatever it might be. Let's talk about like tubas, or I guess in this case, a piano. You could say one of those capabilities is the phonic range of the instrument. So in this case, I think it's actually A0 to C8. It's got 88 keys. There's 88 tones it can produce. It's a polyphonic instrument, meaning it can produce several sounds at the same time. Though with a piano, like unless you have multiple people playing it, certain combinations of sounds, maybe not. You really can't pitch bend on a piano. Like I suppose you could take a wrench to it or something, but generally that's not done. And then of course it has a few different sustain pedals. If you look at a guitar, it's kind of similar, but it can only play 6 notes at a time. Certain strings can only play certain notes. Certain fingerings aren't really possible for most people or humans in general. So it's a bit different. But this is sort of what we want to get to, a language where we can sort of define like what makes different devices we're trying to automate different and how they work. So how do we represent this, right? So maybe capabilities have to be functions now. Like you mentioned, obviously if your thumb is pressing one thing on the piano, it can't press something else, right? Or, if you're pressing the 2nd fret on a guitar, you probably can't also press the 12th fret. That's just generally not possible. And, you can't really have more than one pedal at a time on the piano, that sort of thing. So currently capabilities are largely just Booleans or numbers or strings. And it's not really possible to represent sort of some of that complexity that way. So maybe we need something else, like a lambda expression or something. So I guess what I think we should be working towards, and I should update the year on that slide, is the generic automation vision. So using what we've learned, like trying to wedge WebDriver into all these things, like we learned that like automation actually is really generic. It's just like composing for an orchestra, right? You have a bunch of instruments in your test, you want to have them do different things. But the level you're having them do things at is sort of common amongst them, and it can be shared if you think of it the right way. So Jonathan sort of took that really literally, and this is Jonathan from the APPIUM project, using APPIUM to control a literal symphony of automation. So he's got, I think 4 Android apps up, one playing the drums, one playing the guitar, one playing the piano, and APPIUM's actually sending like finger tap events to each of them to make the music. But this is sort of what we want to get, well, the singing's actually Jonathan. It's actually a good song. It's on SoundCloud if you want to download it. I forget what his handle is on SoundCloud. But anyway, the point is, like, this is how easy automation should be. I want that iPhone to do that. I want that Android to do that. And that is something that, you can express at a very, very generic level. But I guess the trick is, how do we get there, right? So there's some vestiges of, the lineage of APPIUM and WebDriver. So, like, do these things really make sense in a generic automation world? Web element sounds very specific to a website, or XPath. Like, there's no XML hierarchy, like, or HTML or anything like that on, let's say, refrigerators. Execute script is very JavaScript centric. A lot of devices don't run JavaScript. Clicking is like a very mouse paradigm. So maybe how do we replace these? And so, it's kind of tricky. Like, maybe click becomes press. Like with touchscreens that works, with mice that works, with keyboards it kind of works. Maybe web elements just a UI element, something in the user interface. Page source is really just a device hierarchy, and XPath is really just like a UI search expression. Now, Windows script, now we're getting confusing, right? That requires some more thought, right? But in general, devices have operating systems, and operating systems have applications, and applications have user interfaces. And interfaces have elements, and those elements can be manipulated, right? That's sort of like the level of abstraction we need. So it would be great to be talking about automating things in terms of, I have these elements that are part of this application. Granted, you do have some interesting things like the iPhone that can only run one application at a time, but nonetheless, it still kind of holds together. So at the device level, what can you do, right? There's sort of like buttons you can press, you can plug and unplug cables. Those are all sort of device things, right? At the operating system level, you can install applications, remove them, see if they exist. Maybe there's some idea of like a file system or something like that. But more generically, it has sort of like settings, like date, time. It has kind of input and output devices. And maybe there's some way to execute commands on that operating system. The application, it'll have some settings. It'll have a UI hierarchy. that kind of thing. And then obviously those inputs and outputs manipulate that interface, right? So you can think of a mouse as an input, a keyboard as an input, maybe Bluetooth headphones, are they an input? Who knows? Microphone, it's a kind of input. So for an example, like an iMac, that's a device, right? And on that device, it has macOS, and macOS has Firefox, and Firefox has a UI. Now, Firefox has like its own Cocoa UI or whatever it's written in. Maybe it's Carbon, maybe it's really old. I think it's some kind of Java Swing or something. But anyway, and then there's a web-based interface in there as well. Or if you look at an iPhone, that's also a device, also has an operating system. It has a Facebook application that has a user interface. So I have a fridge, maybe it has an application for nutrition or for Amazon Fresh or something like that, and that has user interface. And maybe the fridge has some buttons, or you can think about it like the vacuum cleaner. Maybe it has a user interface where it tells me how full the filter is or something like that. And it has some buttons to turn it on and off. The language we're using here is so generic, it really doesn't matter what you're automating. But it's not so generic that you couldn't write very useful things with it. So there's some open questions, and I somehow want to work robots into this. I don't know if you guys have seen, this is a robot called Tapster. He works with APPIUM, or he used to at least. I'm going to claim that's a video of the world's first ever tweet sent by robot. No one has ever challenged me on this. I have no proof that it was, but I'm not aware of anyone else doing it. But anyway, the point is sort of like once you open it up, all these things just become peripherals and inputs and outputs. To actually do this today with APPIUM, it's very confusing. So the ultimate goal is really just plug and play. Like when you bring something to your computer, back in the day you would get like a CD full of device drivers, and then you would install those, and then maybe you could safely connect your thing. Like if you bought a printer a long time ago, if you connected that before you installed the device drivers, you may be in for a world of hurt. You might hurt your machine, you might burn the printer out, like God knows what would happen. Unfortunately, we're now in the world of plug and play, which is so old, I only vaguely remember before it existed. But that's what we'd like automation to be. We'd like you to bring in, we'd like people to bring their devices automation ready out of the box. And that's what I really think we should be working towards, rather than sort of continuing to bend the WebDriver protocol to do things it was never designed to do. So imagine one day there's a new phone, it's got some new kind of interface, maybe it's foldable. That seems to be a fad right now. And folding is just some part of this scheme of automating things. It's just an interface. It's some kind of, I don't know what kind of interface it would be. It's like a joint interface or something like that. But as a tester, you can just see it as one other input interface to this device. So you know that when you toggle that interface, your app should do something different. You folded it, so now one screen should be showing one thing and the other one should be off, something like that. But you can automate nonetheless. You're free to do what you want to do. So I guess, why did I come up here and give this long talk about all this? I've learned some things, and I thought, now that I actually didn't do this. Who here knows what APPIUM is? Raise your hand. Okay, it's like 20% of you, 30%. Who here has used APPIUM? Okay, so roughly this less, okay. Anyway, why was I asking that? I'm trying to remember why I was asking that. I forgot. But anyway, I've learned some things doing this. Developers want to do things their own way, right? No one here likes being given a tool and saying, you have to use this. People like choice. People like to go out there and find the tool that fits their needs, right? If people like doing things one way, everyone would use Emacs, or everyone would use VI, or everyone would use whatever, right? And you can see both those projects still exist and are both widely used for some reason, because people like them, and it's very personal to them. And that was something that we sought to be with APPIUM. We didn't want to force people to learn a new language or learn a specific way of programming. We just wanted them to come as they are, right? Other frameworks at the time would require you to learn Objective-C or learn Ruby or something like that. The magic of WebDriver is it's all HTTP, so you can use whatever you like. We've always tried to be open and inclusive. I still have never said no to a conference other than I wasn't actually available that week. I kind of worry about saying this because I now worry I'm going to get invited somewhere really terrible. I've yet to be anywhere terrible, but I'm just worried that someone's going to invite me. There is some terrible place. Like North Korea is watching or something, and they're like, he says he never says no, But anyway, bar mitzvahs, weddings, whatever, I'm good. But we also we were always willing to have people join the project and willing to sort of share what we were doing with the rest of the community. And we tried to be as inclusive as possible, which I think is always helpful. We didn't want to exclude people that didn't want to learn JavaScript or didn't want to do mobile or didn't want to do something like that. As I mentioned, I guess sort of going into that point, we also did Android, iOS, many programming languages. Our website was at one point translated into 8 languages. I think we're down to 4 now. But we did base it on a widely accepted standard, which is also, it's much easier to be successful when you sort of leverage someone else's success for your own. So I sort of have to give tribute to Simon and Jason, who built the Selenium project. But in general, there was no need to reinvent the wheel here. So I sort of always tell my developers, before you go and try and build something, make sure you can't get it for free. And this was the case where both were true, I guess. I needed to build something because it didn't exist for mobile, but I didn't need to reinvent how people did automation because Selenium already had a very good paradigm that people liked for doing that, that was very inclusive. So I normally, I will say almost never should you actually write code for anything. You should just find it on open source. But this was sort of the one weird exception. And I haven't found one since really yet, but I'm sure it exists. And I guess lastly, a lot of time and effort went into it. So I don't know, I probably spend 100 nights a year in a hotel room. I will go anywhere to talk about this just to sort of spread the word, help people, that kind of thing. So I don't think that you can just have a great idea and it'll succeed. That's just my effort. There's also people like Jonathan who've worked hundreds of days a year for 5 or 6 years now on it. There are people who have contributed tons of time to it. So, being smart isn't everything. You also have to, or you actually don't even have to be smart. You have to work hard, though, for sure. Let's just say we already talked about all that. So what are the lessons? If I can summarize what I've learned, I'll reduce it to this. Share your ideas with people as often as possible. So often people are afraid to share ideas because they'll feel people will laugh at them, or whatever it might be, or they're not sure, they may not understand it well enough that they feel confident to go talk to experts. Don't ever let that deter you. I've been laughed at a lot. A lot of times I've been right, a lot of times I've been wrong, but the laughing is not necessarily in any way correlated to whether or not you're right or wrong. The laughing is more correlated to maybe people with social problems, I would say. I don't think I've ever laughed at anyone who's brought me an idea, but nonetheless, don't let that deter you. Don't be afraid. Good ideas can come from anywhere, right? So, like I said, I was just a guy at a dating site. I didn't work at some fancy company like SpaceX that lands rockets on boats. That's really cool. I'm not that smart at all. Anyway, but it can come from anywhere. So, like I said, I just wanted my boss to stop yelling at me. Say yes to any new experience you can have. So I think when I first started this, I had never been to a lot of places, and a lot of them sounded kind of scary. I won't lie. Ukraine was actually one of the first places I went on the APPIUM project, 4 or 5 years ago, a long time ago. And I was I'd never been east of, I don't know, Germany or something. So it was quite a new experience for me. But I had a blast. Even as you saw, Chernobyl was fun. Also enjoyed, I'm trying to remember something, well, let's not talk about that. But anyways, the point is, get uncomfortable, it's good for you, it'll help you grow as a person. If you're not uncomfortable, you're probably not growing, and that's not good. I will say the world is a much friendlier place than I've been led to believe. I've yet to go anywhere where people were rude or mean to me. I come from America, we're a country where we terrify our citizens of the rest of the world. We think that no one else has electricity and running water. That's what the government tells everybody. Oh, you don't want to go to Argentina. They eat goats and they eat rats. And it's not true. They don't. I've been. They have really good steak and they have a bunch of other stuff. But anyway, that's sort of what we're led to believe. I know that other places in the world are very similar. They sort of try and say that, oh, we're the best and whatever. And yeah, the truth is everybody's good at something. And so anyways, it's good for you to get out. And then I guess lastly, never, be positive. Don't say bad things about people. There's no need to, so don't laugh at people, don't make fun of them. Don't, be positive. I at one point had an axe to grind with somebody, and I was at a conference in Australia, of all places, very far away, and there were only like 12 people there. Like I flew like 13 hours, and I think 12 people showed up to my talk. Because there was some really awesome guy doing a talk on how he hacked the CIA or something who was on the other track. So I actually kind of was like going to ask people, can we just go see that? Like, because I was actually really interested. But I ended up like saying something bad about someone just because I was sort of frustrated at the time. And of course, that person's boss is in the room, and he came up to me afterwards and was like, we had a chat. So the world's a small place. Try to be as positive as you can. And I guess if you want to sum it up in one quote, life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact. The thing that we call life was made up by people no smarter than you. You can influence it, you can change it, you can build your own things that other people will use. Once you learn that, you'll never be the same again. That is Steve Jobs. And I guess what that means is like, and I guess this is what I want to kick off the conference. So I'm doing the keynote here. My goal is to set the tone for the rest of the day for you guys. And so basically this is saying, have no respect for anyone up here, including myself. Like, we might be experts, we might not be. That's for you to decide. You're testers, right? It's your job to sort of evaluate, like, whether something's good or not, right? And I would walk through life like that. Don't take anything you hear because it's coming from some Harvard-educated Facebook engineer that worked at SpaceX and helped land the rocket on the barge. Like, that guy could know jack shit about automation, to be honest. Like, he probably does. Like, because he probably knows too much trigonometry and other things that are actually useful. But anyway, like, have no respect for any of that. Like, be critical, evaluate everything, you know, sort of make sure you understand, right? And just because, you know, everyone else is using some technology to solve something doesn't mean you should as well. Like, the problems people have at Google and Facebook are very different than the problems you'll have working at a startup. So, like, if you don't have billions of users around the world that are trying to upload horrible videos, like, your problems are very different than Facebook, right? So just because Facebook uses something, it doesn't mean you should as well. And just because I'm up here talking about APPIUM doesn't mean that it's the best tool for what you have to do. You might be better off using something like one of Google's frameworks out of the box for Android or something like that. So anyways, that's what I want you to learn. Like, you can change the world. Just because something's doing it, just because, you know, you're here in Ukraine, and, you know, Silicon Valley's way over there, it doesn't mean like the next great idea isn't sitting in this audience. So I would encourage you to get up and share whatever you have with people while you're here. It's a good opportunity to share what you have and to question what other people are sharing as well. So in general, just do your jobs, right? Test everything. That's why you're testers, right? And we're at a testing conference. So test the speakers, test the conference, test your own ideas, explore, learn. And I guess you'll hopefully one of you out there like has that next great idea or learns something from this conference this week that's going to give you that next great idea. And then one of you can come and like 2 years from now, you can come and like kill APPIUM at a conference. And I can finally like get some sleep and stop traveling. Like I said, no children to feed. Please kill it. So anyways, have a good conference. Be critical, be analytical, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to come.
Big cheers to Dan. Thank you. Okay, maybe you need to this. Any questions? We have like a couple of minutes to ask Dan something. Anyone? Anything? Or you will be catching him somewhere in the corridors, as you wish. Any questions? Inspiration? Just a thank you for APPIUM, for open source software that many people uses. I guess they say, yeah, thank you, but very silently.
Shy crowd.
Very, very shy. As testers, right? Okay, guys, once again, thanks to Dan. Yeah, he will be here whole day. You will be meeting him on the interview, actually, so prepare your questions. Yeah, be ready and try to drink coffee and maybe woke up a bit, so you can handle the whole day. We will meet in 10 minutes for the next speech. Thank you.